Maybe I don't know ball. Maybe I have blind faith in superstar talent. Or maybe I'm seeing a team who is finally putting all the pieces together for what was built for and what I still think is a championship level team. Call it what you want, but I still don't think that we can sleep on the Phoenix Suns. And here's why. What's up, guys? It's Colin from Next Man Up, and today I want to break down why the Phoenix Suns are a must-watch team down the stretch, a finals sleeper pick, and exactly how I think they can make a run at some hardware in 2024. But first, speaking of must-watch, we have you covered for any event you might want to check out in person this year. A Kevin Durant masterclass, Drake playing his classics on tour, or maybe something more low-key where you still need to snatch up some tickets. Whatever it is, use code NEXTMANUP on SeatGeek for $20 off your next purchase. That's right, code NEXTMANUP for $20 off. But for now, we still have to talk about the Suns, so let's get back to it. As we know, the Phoenix Suns made a move that none of us really expected this offseason, where they were involved in a 3-team swap, which eventually landed Phoenix Bradley Beal, one of the highest volume scorers of the last decade. If they weren't already bought in with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant together, there is no doubt that they were now. So moving on from the disappointing DeAndre Ayton to bring in Jusuf Nurkic made a whole lot of sense as well. Now, full disclosure, I was one of the people who at the time hated on both the Bradley Beal and Jusuf Nurkic trades, but as we've seen the season progress, I think I'm starting to see the vision that Frank Vogel is building, and I'll talk about a guy like Nurkic a little bit later as well. Let's break this year down. The Suns started the season kind of brutal if we can be honest. Bradley Beal was out with injury as the team was barely hanging above 500 before the Suns' new big three were even able to share the court together. But still, there was no doubt that Durant and Booker were looking to turn things up this season. As I mentioned, the big three didn't even get to play a game together until December 13th, already 23 games into the season, and they went down to a Nets team that has been nothing short of mid this season. They did not start out as hot as we expected. But since Beal has been fully healthy, the Suns are back to being one of the best teams in all of basketball, at least in my opinion. Currently, they're 37-27, and that stretch from January 11th to the 24th was the longest stretch where their big three was on the court, and the result of that was 7 straight wins over competitive teams such as the Lakers, the Pelicans, and the Pacers. We have seen that this season, the squad that Phoenix has put together can really compete. Recently, Booker has missed some time, but I think it's realistic to say that with the timeline of recovery that they have laid out right now, the Suns will be able to go into the playoffs at full strength. And we know when they have all their pieces together, like I mentioned, they are incredibly dangerous. So why are they still being counted out as elite contenders? To me, they're a team that could still make a run. As a lot of you probably remember, in Washington, Bradley Beal was one of the highest volume shooters in all of basketball, and this was for years. He has had multiple seasons over 30 points per game. He's attempted 19 or more shots a game for 4 straight seasons before coming to Phoenix, and his main role for the Wizards and a majority of his career was been to chuck shots. So when the Suns brought him in, I was part of a large group who hated the idea, to be honest. We claimed that he cannot be effective outside of that main scoring role, but with Durant and Booker both looking as good as ever, I feel like we have to credit Bradley Beal just a little bit, not for taking a step up, but for taking a step back for the good of the team. Without a traditional point guard even on the roster, Bradley Beal has not only had to deal with his own injuries in 2024, but also a positional swap, as he is officially the guy that the Suns trust to run the floor, and especially recently, I've been liking what I'm seeing. Now, don't get me wrong about Beal. He's still putting up 18 points a night on about 58% true shooting, which I know it isn't league altering, but is still one of the best scoring outputs for any NBA third option. But let's get very clear. As a primary playmaker, he's bumped his totals up from 3 assists per game to about 5.5 over the last 2 months. Now, that's no Tyrese Halliburton, but those averages over the last 2 months would put him above traditional point guards like Jrue Holiday and Steph Curry. So that's a pretty decent spot to be for Beal, especially again with the injury struggles he's had this season. Beal's biggest plus this year is that he has not gotten in the way of the 2 true superstars that this Suns team has, being Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. Guys, if you watch basketball, you already know these two, so I'm going to group them together and I'm going to breeze right through them. More than even years past, Devin Booker has looked incredibly fluid in his game, hitting tough shot after tough shot, and we know he's a lead scorer. Not to mention, Kevin Durant, he might just be one of the most efficient NBA players ever, and that has not changed this season. With these two at the helm, it's arguably the best duo in basketball, so I won't bore you guys with the details. You know that these two are good enough to win a championship together. So you would have to think, based on what I'm saying, that the reason for the Suns' success as of late is obvious. Beal plays some true point guard, while Booker and Durant cook everybody else. And while I think that statement is close to the truth, we have to circle back around to a guy I said earlier, Jusuf Nurkic, because he has quietly become one of the biggest X factors in all of basketball. Nurkic isn't necessarily the most likable player in the NBA, and like usual, he came into the season with a lot of hate. Maybe you like Nurkic, but if you ask Portland fans, and especially if you ask Denver fans, they're not huge fans. But with that being said, not every player can say that they were traded for a former number 1 overall pick. And despite a guy like DeAndre Ayton being basically ran out of Phoenix, people were still against Nurkic, saying he wasn't worth that value, but he has done everything to prove that that is absolutely false. Nurkic is proving himself this season with a plus-minus of nearly 100 more points than Devin Booker or Kevin Durant. And clearly, he is the most consistent player on this team. The big man is doing exactly what you want. With the Suns roster, they no longer need a dynamic scorer like DeAndre Ayton, and they no longer have time to develop him. And to avoid the too many cooks in the kitchen scenario, they brought in Nurkic for the very reason to rebound and pass the ball to the superstars. And to be honest with you guys, he is doing that at an elite level. You just saw the game the other night where he eclipsed 30 rebounds, but he is arguably the best rebounding big man in the league right now. In my opinion, he's got to be top 5. Nurkic isn't known for being some playoff dominant great, but we saw he held his own in Portland with Damian Lillard down their stretch, and some would say that rebounding is the most important part of basketball. As we know, great teams win the rebounding battles, and with Nurkic down low, the Suns are easily one of the best rebounding teams in the entire NBA, which we definitely couldn't say about them last season, so they just added another X factor to their game. So with KD and Booker being incredible, Beal stepping into his role, and Nurkic outperforming his expectations on a night-to-night basis, as well as role players such as Grayson Allen and the newly acquired forward Royce O'Neal doing what they do best, I think the Suns can go out and win it all. But why do some people not feel the same way? Yo, guys, I get it. It's quite simple. It's the continuity. That might sound like a stretch, but hear me out. When you look at the last 7 to 8 finals winners, what do they have in common? Everyone is always on the same page. The Nuggets last year are a great example, and fans of the channel know I love to talk about Denver, so this is a good chance for me. Nikola Jokic is probably the best player in basketball right now, so that definitely helps. But outside from that, Coach Michael Malone has that Denver team so well coached to a point where you'd rarely see a mistake. KCP and Aaron Gordon were elite defenders, especially in switchable situations. Jamal Murray was the ultimate quarterback of the offense with unlimited range of his own. And even when Michael Porter Jr. struggled in the playoffs, he understood when he was on the court, his role was to shoot at will, which made defenses have to focus on him and play him honest even when he was cold. That team was coached to an incredible level. With that in mind, we saw the teamwork execute on full display and take Denver to that next level. I know it sounds corny because these are professionals and some of the best athletes in the world, but sometimes teamwork takes priority over talent, even in the NBA, and we've seen that from a lot of the recent finals winners, especially the Nuggets. So when you look at this Suns roster with a completely overhauled rotation, it's very easy to say that they will flop because of that reason. But when I look at the 2020 Lakers, a team that blew their team up at the deadline and still were overpowered by the talent of LeBron James and Anthony Davis and had their role players step up, I see the Phoenix Suns in a very similar vein to that team, and as we know, that means they can compete. I like what I'm seeing from Phoenix, and I think when push comes to shove, they're going to figure it out and be a contender in the West. So I laid out the picture for you guys, the good and the bad, and believe me, I'm sure you guys have a little bit more good things to say and a lot more bad things, so feel free to lay those out in the comment. And as currently a 6th seed in the West, I completely understand if you think that this year simply isn't the one for Phoenix. They have those continuity issues, they can't stay healthy, and do you trust them to make it past an elite team in the West like OKC or Denver? I don't know. But guys, at least to me, if all the cards are laid out the right way, the Suns get to run their premier lineup on a night-to-night basis, and maybe even if they